Welcome to Spy Satellites, a podcast about Dune Imperium and the people who play it. I'm your host, CJ, and this is Rotation 2, where we'll discuss one of the newest homebrew choices that's really changed competitive play, called Hidden Picks, and we'll give our top 5 intrigues from Dune Imperium all the way up to the Immortality expansion. So join us for a roundtable discussion focusing on cards, combos, atomics, and everything spice. If you like what we do, please give us a like and subscribe, tell your friends, and tell us how we're doing. We're always trying to improve the quality of our content, and we can't do it without you, the listener. Orbiting Arrakis with me today is a bunch of very fine individuals. One, of course, is the one, the only, our magnificent magistrate, BlackShadow.
Maybe I should just keep joining these just to see what extra superlatives are going to come off. As much interest as anything else. Hello, everyone. Hope you're keeping well. Yep, Shadow's here. Fortunately, I should be a lot more cognizant than last time. It's not 4 a.m. when I'm recording this, so I'm very grateful. Although that's not to say that I'm not an incredibly busy man, because I'm an incredibly busy man at the moment.
Yeah, you are.
Tournaments and everything, but as you would expect. But it's good to be here.
Also with us is now, I'm calling you the Omni Gamer, the future World Series of Board Gaming champion, Orski.
Thank you very much. Good to be here. Excited to talk some Dune Imperium.
Awesome. Great to have you. If you did not know, Orski does a weekly live stream with the community on his channel. He has a ton of great Dune content, and you can check that out in the link below. Or if you're watching this, or listening to this rather, on Spotify or iTunes, you can search for Orski on YouTube. With us also orbiting Arrakis is the player who may have single-handedly saved Romber, the tenacious tactician Lannister.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be back as always.
And sadly today, Patience is on the far side of Dune participating in a spice orgy, so he can't make it today. So let's move on without him. Today, we're going to be talking about a couple of interesting things. We're going to start with the Golden Path International. The Golden Path International has been going on for about a month now. It's a huge tournament. We're using something called Hidden Picks. Hidden Picks is a format where at the beginning of the game, in reverse player order, players are going to pick their leaders. 6 of them will be removed from the game before they get to choose, and then they will be placed basically hidden from everyone else until everyone picks. And then once everyone picks, they'll be kind of turned face up. In real life, that's what happens, but they just get popped into existence on TTS. And then we get to see, and we get to continue on with the game. How do y'all feel about Hidden Picks? I mean, it's been kind of a big change for the format since our last tournament.
I'll fill in here.
Yeah,
so, quick bit of history, because I don't 100% remember. So beforehand, we had the reverse picks, 4th to 3rd, 2nd to 1st. I don't remember exactly how that came about or when it came about, but I think we brought it in because it had always been perceived in Rise of X that 4th position was weaker than the other 3. And going off the stats of the Imperium Cup, there was evidence to suggest that that's possible, but it wasn't quite conclusive. But enough people kind of felt like aggrieved to be in 4th position or whatnot. So this was an attempt, obviously, to kind of rectify that. I nearly didn't do this either. Obviously, huge thanks to Aussie Mandius as well, who was the originator behind this whole idea of Hidden Picks. And I was like, getting ready for this tournament, I was like, I want to do something, but give it a bit of a different spin, a bit of a different identity to the Imperium Cup. And I thought, well, we've got this Hidden Picks thing that not many people have really been delving into. And I kind of thought about it, played some games, but I was like, you know what? I think we might be onto something here. And I felt there was enough definite grounds to give Hidden Picks itself much more of a tournament setting to really see what it is. And I'm sure I speak for pretty much everyone to say that it has completely revolutionized how this game works.
Yeah,
I don't think I don't think that's anywhere near debatable. The changes that it has enforced have been, so far that I can tell, have been very notable. But I try and see and think, are any of them negative? And I don't really think so.
No, I don't think so either. I think it's a great choice. I think it's the best thing we've done for the tournaments so far, honestly. So here's an example from a recent game. my most recent game in the tournament, I was in first position, and the 4th position player, who I think was David Knorr, who he picked Leto, and it went around the table and then came to me, and I didn't see a Leto, but I picked Ilban. And because I was in first position Ilban, I could have definitely picked like Memnon or something like that. I was thinking about it, but like the Ilban pick in first position, I like that. However, it ended up being we were competing over Mentat, but he knew that could happen. So like the fact that when we got to the hidden picks, when he started hidden picks, he could see like, okay, he's going to compete if an Ilbon gets picked. He could have chosen that. This is an interesting kind of choice, a dilemma. You're going to pick your battles when you start going through hidden picks. Like if there's a beast and a Romber, you go like, I might be fighting against this Romber for combat, or this Hundro, or whatever. Or if there's a Helena and an Ekaz, like I might be fighting with this person for cards in the row. Like there's some choices that you have to make, and you might pass on a leader for reasons that in like the open picks you wouldn't have, which is interesting. Or you might have picked a leader that you would have passed on, and so on. So I think it's a great choice. It ended up, I think in that game, I ended up getting just slightly ahead of David Noor. I think because we were competing so much, I just got a hair above him in points. But it was, I think it was a big deciding factor in the game and why it ended up going that way. But
I think that's one of the fascinating subtleties of the hidden picks, though, is that typically in Rise of X games, like the first few players tend to go into some combination of fold space, smuggling, and usually hardy warriors. Fourth can never really get to those unless someone decides to do something different, like go tech negotiation for artillery, or a beast goes for like memo corders, or maybe steel suits. But typically, it's those three taken out. So Fourth's compensation is the fact they're the only person that knows what leaders could be chosen. They're the only people with complete information. Once you go into that third spot, you don't know who's been picked, and you haven't already kind of second guessed what people have chosen. Now is that a big difference? I mean, you could maybe debate both ways about it, but I think it'd be fascinating to see when this tournament is over and we compile the information to see what impact this has had. It's a snapshot, admittedly, but the impact this has had on like positions and how they're viewed, and leader pick rate specifically as well. Like, obviously, I think in Rise of X, at least half of fourth positions are just being picked as Helena. I think it was more than that. If I
it was
remember
a lot.
correctly. And obviously now you can't necessarily do that because Helena's not always there. But Helena is hardly the only person that's viable in fourth position, and we've seen plenty of that. There's a variety of leaders that can do well in fourth position. And again, that's better help the fact that fourth position, like if you picked Helena, then it makes someone want to pick Ekaz later on because you get counter picks. Because like, they're going to go for, I don't know, guild bankers or in the shadows. Well, I'm going to get there first, and you're like, and you pick Ekaz almost like a hate pick almost.
Right.
So that has obviously definitely not as easy now because once you get to third position, you don't know if Helena's in the game. She might be. She might have just not been selected. Like, she might not have been available. So
yeah. But then you get in this weird position where if you see like a Baron Vladimir Harkonnen and a Tessia in the fourth position, and then like a bunch of garbage characters. Not sorry, but you see like some like Paul Atreides or like Ariana. I'm just kidding. But you see some Ariana, or you see some Elisa, who I think is great in the in Immortality, but I think struggles a little bit in Ix. You might just, even though like Tessie or Baron are poor in fourth position, Tessie is fine, but Baron's pretty bad in fourth position, you might take him anyway. You might say like, you know what, my choice is, this is the best choice I'm going to have. And if I let it go, getting a Baron in first or second position doesn't seem like a great idea. So, you kind of like have to, I don't know, there's a little bit of maneuvering in the hidden picks that you don't see in the usual reverse picks.
Yeah, because it's a smaller pool of leaders. So if you don't take Baron, someone else is going to take Baron, and that's going to suck. So maybe it's better to have Baron in fourth than to let someone else have Baron in second or third or whatever else. At least you've got the Baron, and so no one else does. So it's kind of the weirdest. It's the vagaries of hidden picks. Everyone's kind of sussing out. But no, I'm super glad that I decided to throw it in for this. And yeah, as far as I can tell from watching games, watching people picking leaders, and just the fact people had to come out their comfort zone for a lot of games, you've seen a lot of different leaders getting played in various spots. It can only be good for the game.
Yeah. Orski, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I completely agree. I'll probably end up mirroring a lot of the things you just said, but the ban, the like quote unquote ban system where you're just randomly removing leaders from the pool, that really helps with just making sure it's not the same 4 meta leaders over and over again, which I really appreciate because this is a tournament. If certain leaders are perceived to be better, they're going to be chosen way more often unless there's some kind of like fun incentive to do something else. So just the fact that some leaders are removed at the beginning itself is a big change that I think is really nice. And
Yeah.
then
Do you
kind
wanna-
of like what you were talking about. Oh, yeah.
I was gonna say, I do want to throw in as well. Like the one thing that was posed to me as well was about like actually having the players going through a ban phase of leaders. But this came into the same problem. You're just going to get the same 3 or 4 leaders banned every single game. So it doesn't really solve the problem, I didn't think.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think this is a better choice because you want those leaders in the game. You just don't want them, there every time. So this solves that problem. Random choices of bans is better, I think.
Yeah. So, sorry, Orski. Just want to throw that.
No, absolutely. Feel free to interrupt me like at any point because
I would
won't
not
get these
give you
thoughts
that
out there.
license.
So yeah, the just removing random leaders from the pool I think is really nice. And then always talking about trying to balance the positions. The fact that the fourth player has more information to make decisions on whether or not they want to go this leader. Maybe you don't go the combat leader if there's another combat leader in the game because it'll be high. And then just obviously the better positions first and second, having less information left over. I think it's just a very interesting way to balance the game. And it adds some like good variety to the games as well. And it's not so complicated that it's restrictive to newer players to the game. Like
Exactly.
I've heard of people like setting this up in home games, and once I start playing this in real life, I will as well probably.
Yeah, I agree. That's important too. Is if we model something in this tournament and then it's too complicated, like people won't do it at home, and we really want this to kind of like mirror your at home in real life plays. I think that's an important factor to note. Lannister,
Should
what do
also
you
be
think?
noted as well, like when eventually you do make your way to Vegas, if they start doing this system, they need to have a word with me, and I will be expecting royalties.
Oh, okay.
100%, boys. Like I'm pretty sure you were using the reverse picks, which we've been using for a while. If we get to Vegas and we find you're doing this hidden pick system, I'm expecting something in the mail, 100%. Otherwise, I will be a very, very angry man.
Are you gonna split that with Ozzy?
He deserves a bit of it, yeah.
He deserves a bit.
He deserves a bit. Well, we'll work it out. I own lunch.
Lenny, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I really like hidden picks. I think in many ways it's benefited people like you and me and possibly BlackShadow because we play a lot of quote unquote meme characters a lot of the time. So it kind of
Let's just be honest. Paul Atreides is not very good at Rise of X.
Yeah.
Like I make no bones about it. I pick him as like he has uses. Like I have been delving and practicing a bit with like going like real heavy sword pull, which is a lot of fun and it's great entertainment. But let's not be honest here. These leaders that we're using are they are not designed for Rise of X at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it allowed me to go through it. Fortunately, I went through a round of ranked losses, like a huge number of ranked losses before I got really good with Romber. So I was not afraid to pull it out in the ranked matches, and so I think it also shows that a lot of people are either they don't have the choice or they're willing to take the chance on certain leaders because it's not always the same as they say Baron, Tessia, Beast, so forth. So just having those options taken out at times and you having to select from, for lack of a better term, subpar leaders is really, it adds a lot of spice to the game, and I really like that. And it puts you in uncomfortable situations, and I think if you want to prove to be the best, you should be able to be versatile, and it's good to have that type of option in your belt, and I think it proves that you're better than just being a one-trick pony. And
Yeah. I think that's the thing with hidden pick. It makes you a better player. I 100% believe that. It's. I'm gonna just pick one at random here because it's easy to bash on potentially because they're not my favorite leader. But for example, like someone could probably pray through like a tournament of Dune Imperium as just say like Helena Richesse, and you could probably do fine because she's fairly solid. She's kind of non-interactive, and you could play every single game as Helena, and you could probably do all right. But I mean, is that really what we want? I don't think so. I think being able to like have to adapt to different situations, and Dune Imperium is a game of adaptation. It always has been. If I don't want to sit here and say like every single person listening to this could win a game of Dune Imperium as the Baron in 6 rounds, but he can definitely win a game of Doom Imperium in 6 rounds, and like a lot of us have done it. But it feels good to do, but like, you know, it's a bit different to winning as some other leaders in 6 rounds or whatever else, you know. And having that diverse skill set has got to be what the top of the player pool, for example, wants to achieve. Not just having 2 leaders, for example, and they'll play one or the other and just specialize in that. What do you do when you don't have either of those leaders? You've got to kind of make it up on the fly, and then you've got to work it out from there. So I think at the very least, like just diversifying the player pool and the leaders that you've got to pick, especially in like first position when you've got a choice of what, maybe 5 or 6 leaders, and you may not be very comfortable with any of them. Well, you're gonna have to learn to be, and those are the positions you can be getting into, and especially in a tournament setting, when it is going to be people playing pretty hard, pretty well, good players everywhere. Like, you're gonna have to learn how to play these characters and win games.
Yeah, there's also something. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying. I also like that there are certain characters that got a shadow buff for having hidden picks. Like I think we talked about in the past.
Is that a pun, or is that
Shadow buff?
Shadow buff for Ilban, for example. Ilban, you know when Leto's there, and so if Leto is not in that selection pool when it comes to you, you know you're in good hands. Like,
Unless you're first position and it happens to you in the tournament game.
well,
you just gotta take a gamble?
yeah,
That's the way it goes.
that's just the way it goes sometimes. But by and large, like I think the results speak for themselves in the tournament. Ilvan has had some great success so far. So, yeah.
Yeah, agreed. I think there's one thing to be said about this. If there's one thing to be said about this structure, it's that it's pushing people out of that groupthink that certain leaders are the only ones that can win all the time. Because I know, and we've definitely contributed to that on this channel a little bit on hidden assets, rather.
I mean, we've had the evidence, and we had to go with what we had.
Yeah,
It was an open pick system. It things that having just general open picks kind of encouraged that, you know.
It did,
and that wasn't intentional.
No,
we didn't mean for that to happen, but that was that was a side consequence. As I said before, like with the artificial tournament Zara made, for example, that heavily benefited the Baron, in my opinion, because the Baron would just power ahead first up, and then no one would really want to contest him, so they just let him have one of the top 2 spots. So he had a massive success rate. That wasn't an intention of any point. We weren't trying to do that. Sure, Zion wasn't definitely trying to do that, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. You know, it's the weird vagaries of things.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's pushed people to try different things. For instance, I mean, I haven't really played a lot of Hundro, but I ended up playing Hundro in my second game, and I think I played really well. And it didn't work out, but I think like having to flex that muscle of figuring out being creative and playing a little bit more creatively and out of your comfort zone is good for the game. I think that really can only benefit in the long run.
I don't know. After my first tournament game, I might never play Hunter ever again, but I mean...
Well, I mean, I still enjoyed my play. I just I ended up 4th place.
It was the crazy situation I ended up in. I think I could have picked anyone and I would have been pretty hosed, so it's just... Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about our next topic here. We're going to be going to Highliner, everybody. We're going to be talking about our top 5 intrigues in Dune Imperium up to Immortality. And so the way I imagine this going is we're going to all kind of do our 5th pick and then our 4th pick and all the way up to 1. We'll go round table. Let's start with Orski.
Ooh, interesting, because I did not rank these in any kind of way, but going through my list, I could probably do it in my head. I will say, starting this off, I was kind of torn between doing just the most powerful ones versus ones I enjoy the most. And I kind of ended up leaning towards the ones I enjoy the most. If I wanted to just go for the most powerful ones, it's going to be the ones that give you victory points a lot of the time. But I tried to pick ones that created interesting game states, maybe make people play a little weird if they know you have it. And I guess starting out with ones that make people play a little bit weird sometimes, if they're feeling especially paranoid, Double Cross, which allows you to pay 1 Solari to force someone else to lose a troop in the conflict so you can deploy your own. I love this intrigue card when someone at the very end just tries to sneak in 1 troop. See if they can get that 2nd place reward, and then you just come out of nowhere, you throw an extra troop in, you take theirs out, and then suddenly that's a pretty good value, you know?
Yeah, Double
Um,
Cross nearly made my top 5. It was an honorable mention. It narrowly missed that. It's a lot of fun because like you can punish people for only putting in one shoot, trying to get things. You just even if you're going to win the combat, you just pay a Solari and just deprive them of resources. And a lot of the time, I do find, especially early game, this is really brutal because someone's looking to get hold of like extra water, for example, so they can go mining. They think they're just going to get it on the cheap, and then you deprive them, and suddenly that causes a lot of problems. So yeah, I nearly had this as top 5. It was very very close.
Yeah, I agree. I also almost put it on my top 5. It was in my top 7. I was like, I love this card. It's the saltiest card in the game, I think. It's like
It's so cheap.
Oh, yeah.
It's one coin. It's so cheap as well. Like it's really hard to do a lot about. So, it makes it means if people late game, like in the tier 3 conflicts, are only putting in one troop to try and get all the free spice, you can punish them. They've got to be putting in 2 to kind of protect them from that.
Oh yeah, and especially depending on the build, like mid game. Let's say you have a bunch of daggers. I can't remember the one that gives you 4 daggers, the tactile, but let's say you have that. You have like some other daggers from your hand, and you just want to get a troop in, but you don't really have any good combat spaces you want to. This is a good way to throw in that random troop and maybe pull down a first or second place. So I don't know. I like it. It's pretty flexible, and it can definitely create some funny situations at the table.
nice.
The worst. It's 1 coin for a full sword swing. That ain't bad. At its
Yeah.
worst.
And it feels so bad when you get targeted with it. It's like, why did you take my troop out? And it forces some amazing table dynamics too. So that's a good pick for me. Yeah, I agree. Nice.
Sure. I actually have a small story on this end for one great player named Doom Over Morals. He used double cross to great effect. It was essentially I had a dreadnought and it was going to be detonated, and I blocked all of his spice accesses because I knew he was going to desert ambush and kick out my guy. So I blocked them all.
Oh no! I think
Yeah, so he had no chance to get me going here. So he goes to smuggle, and he plays desert ambush on smuggle, and he uses that double cross card, and it interacts in the sense that you get to deploy with it. And so he used that double cross to kick out my guy from smuggling, and it ended my victory right there. And that was like one of the greatest moves I'd ever seen.
That's
so,
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a
Wow.
great card.
It's a good interaction to note. The double cross desert ambush combo. Desert ambush got played against me, by the way, in a recent game with patience, and oh man, that card is so brutal. That card is just unbelievably dangerous. Anyway, yeah. All right, Lanny, tell me your number 5.
My number 5. It's not a immortality intrigue, but bypass protocol to me is one of the best cards. It's in I think it was BlackShadow who mentioned to me before, like when we're playing in Immortality, it's like an arms race. We're basically vying for the top tier cards, and whoever gets the bigger guns basically wins the day. So that card basically acquires the best of the best. Like 5 cost cards are like the creme de la creme, like Talaxu Master, for instance, or even something as simple as Leah Kynes or Esmar Tuig. And he put it to the top. And, I think it was the other day, I sorry to be a repeat on this. There was a desert ambush on the board, and the guy had a bunch of dreadnoughts. I just did bypass protocol, brought it to my hand, kicked out all his dreadnoughts and all his troops, and just won the day. It's a basic intrigue, but it has so many applications to it that it's highly flexible, and I enjoy that intrigue immensely.
Wow, nice. That's a good choice. So bypass protocol has 2 parts to it, right? So there's the first part is acquire a card that costs 3 or less. That's just good, and can help you snipe a 2 or 3 cost card. That's generally good, like shifting allegiances or in the shadows or something like that, right? But it's that second part you're talking about that's the real game changer. Acquire a card that costs 5 or less and put it on the top of your deck for 2 spice. Like that, especially, I think you're right. In Immortality, this card is pretty nuts. I think it's okay in Ix, but there aren't enough ways to then draw your deck or there's just not enough ways to capitalize on it. It's still very good in Ix, but yeah.
There's
Nice
just
use of it I saw in Ix. I think this was one of the tournament games where someone had the 3 tactiles and then they could just pull up Ixian Engineer for the victory point, put it right back on top of their deck.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, that was towards the end. Yeah, he X engineered and got it with bypass. I completely missed it, and I was like, wow, that's pretty sick.
Yeah, that was a great play.
Yeah, there's some good plays with this card. That's a really good one. Nice. All right, BlackShadow, what do you got for number 5?
So yeah, I mentioned Double Cross was an honorable mention. I really had trouble, kids, like trying to get it down. I had to go through like 5 separate rounds of culling through cards to get down to 5, and even then it was really difficult. I had a huge problem doing it. So Double Cross was an honorable mention. Bribery also was an honorable mention. Just simple 2 Solari faction bumps, so many uses. The bane of defending factions when someone just turns up Bribery and has like power play or something. There's just nothing you can do about it. Absolute brute. It's so easy. 2 Solaris, like how do you defend against that? Really savage. And I think that's generally the thing I found with a lot of my intrigues is that I think the ones I value a lot more are those that are really easy to use and don't require a lot of setup. So I've actually got 5th, and it's my surprise. I've actually got Glimpse the Path as my 5th, which is the pay a spice, get a border, and draw a card. Basic as anything, but that's the whole beauty of it. The fact it's so useful. A spice is not too hard to come by. The extra water is always useful. Maybe you're looking to go to Hardy Warriors and you need to get the water so you can get there. The card draw can be good for sword decks. If you're like running artillery or on pure Bashar, it can fund Spiceman's Flows. If you're playing like I do, I play a lot of Paul Atreides. Obviously, you know what your top card is. That could be really big to pair that up with. If you just put a card on top of your deck with bypass, it pairs well with that. It's just such a multifaceted card, and it's so easy to use. It was pretty close between this and Water of Life, which obviously is a Spice and more for free cards, but that feels a lot more tailored towards specifically Spice Must Flows, or you've got it towards the back end of the game, you've got not much else to do, so you're just going to draw a load of cards and hope it all works out sort of thing. I think Glimpse has so many nuanced little uses and can be kind of tailored to whatever you're doing, and is almost always usable as well. The last thing you want is to have like loads of great intrigues, but you can't play any, and then you get 4 or more and they get stolen. Absolutely dreadful. Glimpse of Path is almost never an issue. You can play it almost whenever you want. Unless you have some kind of weird game you're just not picking up any spice for whatever reason. But yeah, Glimpse got 5 for me. Bit of a surprise pick probably, but just so multifaceted and so easy to use, and its applications are fantastic. And again, in Rise of X, like that water, that gets you to research station. You can draw 3 cards for a spice, and a water. Great. It's basically, and you're doing research at the same time. I draw 4 cards if you've done your research. So I think it's a really solid card.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. Glimpse of Path, yeah, solid. The sneakiness with the water, I think, is a really cute play. Yeah, I like that.
Lots of uses. And again, you're not having like consumer resources. Like you're getting resources out of it and the card draw, which can be really big sometimes. So, I'm sure the comment section will probably rinse me for that for this suggestion, but that's fine.
No, man, it's your choice. They can say whatever they want. I'll delete it. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
All right,
nerds.
My number 5 is a card there's 2 copies of in the Imperium deck, or the Intrigue deck, excuse me. I think it is one of the most versatile cards in the game, and I also think that it benefits a lot from the Immortality expansion. That's Dispatch and Envoy.
Yeah.
So Dispatch and Envoy says this card, the card you play this turn has the following icons, and it gives you all the faction icons. So the fact that this combos so well with the new Tleilaxu cards, which some of which have limited icons, and that can be paired with other cards to get even better effects, just makes this card amazing. It is just chef's kiss, amazing. Every time I draw it, I'm happy I draw it, and it's not one I'd ever trash. You know where it is. If you have one, likely not going to see the other one, but there are 2 in the deck. So
I do want to make. I almost had this as an honorable mention as well. I will protest. I had one game, and it was pretty savage. I Bindu to make sure I was last action. I used Dispatch and Envoy with Gola and Desert Ambush to Highliner. I won the tier 3 combat uncontested.
Wow.
It was disgusting.
How do you sleep at night?
I'm only going to do this once. If I do it again, I'm going to need like to take showers daily, more of them. And I just like I had to do this the once, and it was just like it was the grossest thing you ever saw. Just like retreating. I think it was, it was. I think I got like 13 units pushed out of combat. It was just like, what is going on here? I mean, what can you do about that? Not a whole lot, but yeah,
Yeah.
it was amazing, absolutely amazing.
Uh,
But it goes to show like Dispatch Envoy, like it's versatile, gets you a lot of access, and it turns a bad hand into a potentially pretty good one.
Right.
Especially like in the mid game, like where faction access can be really awkward and you're trying to get to an alliance or someone else does, Fremen, whatever else. The extra trip to fold space to get you shipping, like Dispatch Envoy can do all of these things. And then you combine it with some of like the agent boxes, which you still keep, that's super, super strong, even something simple as like Lido sending his signet ring with Dispatch and Envoy. That's a double bump. You can't really do a lot about that, and that catches so many people out. So yeah, really, really strong. A lot of fun if you get used to that. Especially for me, I love using factions as well, loads. So it's good show.
Yeah, this one. So a couple of cool things that happens with Immortality is you can use it with long reach, which is just insane. Like it just happens to have these icons, or shifting allegiances from the base game. It's insane with shifting allegiances. That card is already insane, but when you can just get a guaranteed, 3 bumps on one track, it's a little oppressive sometimes. So yeah, I like it a lot. But,
yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I was number 4 on my list, so.
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert!
Same.
Was it number 4?
I'm gonna bring that one up next day.
It was
All right,
actually my
Orski.
number 4.
Your number 4 is Dispatch and Envoy.
Oh yeah,
was-
it is just such a fun card. I'll
Yeah.
let you finish, Lannister.
Okay, so like, I'll give you an example. Like you use even Dispatch Envoy for humanity, and you go to Highline, and then you get to complete the bump on the Imperial bonus at the same time, and bam, suddenly you got like 7 additional troops going in, or even something as simple as like Missionary Productiva after you've played a Benny before that. One of my newest Immortality combos is High Priority Travel. Sometimes I get blocked on Highline and I go to Conspire with Dispatch the Envoy with High Priority Travel, and High Priority Travel allows you to deploy the troops that you get from Conspire in. And you get an intrigue that might supplement some other things, and your bonus from hitting that Imperial bump, as I always say, that's like 4 troops right there. That matches that Highliner special. So it's just so versatile. I always use it for power cards. I would suggest the same. Like, don't just willy-nilly throw it away. Just save it up for a power card, and you'll see exactly what we're talking about.
BlackShadow. What's your number 4?
So now I review it, maybe this should have been number 4, but I still it's a card I just thoroughly enjoy using. Strong Arm.
Oh yeah.
Which I thoroughly enjoy using. It's basically turns like half the faction spaces minimum into an automatic double bump if you want it. Lose a troop when you send the agent to a faction, you get an extra bump. Straightforward, simple. Again, multi-purpose. Send it to like a faction you haven't got useful. And funny enough, actually, the tournament game I literally just commentated before this. Hundro got this immediately. Turn 1 shipping access. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Can't fault that. And Strong Arms it's just so handy. A troop is not particularly expensive. You're going to get a lot of them over the course of the game, and it's just a nice way of just being able to pivot, turns, maybe looking to go combat heavy for a turn, then someone highlines out and knowing like, okay, I can step back from this, and then you can use Strong Arms just a bumper and get some extra distance on a faction, race that. I think it's really nice to use. It's probably not everyone's favorite card, but I thoroughly enjoy it. And it's like, especially for me, I love using Conspire, for example. So Conspire just becomes an automatic double bump pretty much with Strong Arm. And the Emperor's always been a faction where typically you want to try and get a passive bump or 2 without actually sending agents there.
Mm-hmm.
So Strong Arm's like great for the Emperor. It's great obviously for space if you can get there early, stuff like that. But everything has its uses as well. So the only problem with Strong Arm, of course, it's easy to forget. So especially newer players will like use Strong Arm at the end of a turn, because it's not how that works. So
Right.
that's pro quo, but everyone has to do that once, then you go from there. And we still do it from time to time. We're like, oh yeah, of course, idiot. I've been
For Strong Arm, I love that card too. It's a great double bump situation. One troop is generally not very difficult to supplement, and me being someone who is in love with the combat aspect, I'm always under the Imperial, so losing one troop to get two more troops sounds good to me. And I think it's also one of those great situations where you don't have to pay any additional resources, like bribery needs two Solari, or um, other things might need, like quid pro quo needs two spice, stuff like that. Like this just requires that one troop loss, which is pretty easy to meet those conditions. So yeah, it's a great card for sure.
And with other cards, let's say like bribery or other things, bits and pieces, like you can kind of like, especially quid pro quo, if you think someone's got it, you can keep an eye and say, have they got two spice making some weird faction moves? You can kind of play. If it's strong arms, like pretty hard to defend against. Like if someone's got strong arm, like it's hard to really do much about that. I will say strong arm perhaps is maybe slightly trickier in a way it feels like to use in Immortality compared to Rise of Ix. Because of course there are now other cards that also use troops for various bits and pieces, the surgeon, Piter, that sort of thing. So having actual troops can be a little trickier sometimes. And obviously as well, like you need to be like making pushes to like get your factions to like 5 spaces, 6 spaces in Immortality. So it's things you'll be careful, but I still think very, very versatile and pretty hard to do much about sometimes.
Nice.
Yep, absolutely agreed.
Yeah. I will say it has become interesting how troops are becoming a resource in and of themselves. I have liked that shift in Immortality, and I do think it's them kind of taking this card's game design a little bit further. I do like it, and I think it can make for some interesting plays. I do think it's probably just a weaker version of bribery in that it's just much less flexible. And
Yeah,
two Solari versus a
I
troop
had
is kind of
bribery as a honorable mention, but I thought strong arm was more interesting.
yeah.
All right, my number 4 is, I was just mentioned a moment ago, it's quid pro quo. So my number 4 is the kind of counterpart to BlackShadow's, is that you pay 2 spice to gain 1 influence with each faction that has at least one of your agents on its board spaces. And so this could be just a completely nuts, like 3 potentially. I mean, if you get 4 influence with this, that'd be insane. You'd have to have your Swordmaster and the Mentat, but it could happen. But the thing that's cool about quid pro quo is you can time it a little bit better, I think, than with strong arm. Like the idea that you can, get where you need to go on the track, pick that up and then like go another space, then play quid pro quo, go up, get a bonus. Like I like to do it on the Emperor track, get the level 3, and then go to like a combat space, throw the extra troops in, stuff like that, or cash in the 2 spice for water with the Fremen, go to research station, something like that. There's lots of cool plays you can do with it, and it just combos really well with those combat spaces. And in general, like those are some things that I really value, is those cards that allow you to come up with kind of creative and interesting plays. One of my honorable mentions, which I'm sure is going to be on Lannister's list, was advanced weaponry, which is like the other one that could have been. It's like my possible other 4th pick, but it's basically like allows you to like shape your turn a lot more cohesively into a combat strategy. But this one's like the opposite, shapes your strategy into that track climbing strategy. I think it's very strong.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. I mean,
I would agree. It's like the like a more kind of longer form of strong arm. Strong arm's like the shock impacts, trying to steal alliances, getting in front. Whereas obviously, quid pro quo is more about like getting the setup, and obviously you're paying more spice potentially for it. And like there are times like you might just simply go to a space and then pay 2 spice to get the extra bump straight away. There's times for that, but the idea, it's not really it's designed for. It's about setting up a turn to hit loads of factions and then getting the passive bumps towards the end of it. Also, there is obviously, of course, timing it with the Emperor, for example, getting hold of those 2 troops, for example. That's pretty nice, maybe Hardy Warriors, getting the extra water so that you can get to research station, stuff like that. There's a lot more fancy applications for quid pro quo, but I do think it does sometimes get used just to get the bump immediately, which is a little bit of a shame, but it obviously depends on your game. But no, I think it's a fair shout.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the greatest, it could be lucky, could be setup play, was one of the games I witnessed where Chom directorship was out on the field, and the prior combat was the Mentat one. So the guy had 4 agents. He managed to hit all 4 of those zones, and he got the Chom through Water of Life. It was a game over right there.
Three bumps on all factions
8
in one
bumps.
round.
Yep, I lost that match horribly, but I could not do anything
What
but
can you
just
do?
clap. Yeah, it was
What
like,
can you do? I mean, that's
Yep.
just like, just shrug and just say, well, I mean, someone should have nuked that row. That's where
Yep.
they went wrong.
you could be sure I won the combat and got the half a bump. Yeah, so
Great. Just need 4 more now to get back to where you need to be.
yep.
Jeez.
That's awesome. All right.
Yeah,
Orski.
Quid Broker is great. I will say, it's just good value too. I feel like people buy memo quarters all the time just for the bump, and this at minimum is just another memo quarters.
Yes.
Because usually you're not buying that for the victory point, but and it's not too hard to get the 2 faction tracks to stretch out that 2 spice value even more. And whenever you can get 2 bumps, kind of equivalent to 1 victory point. So Quid Pro Quo is actually a very good card, despite the fact that the cost kind of makes it a little bit prohibitive if you don't have the spice for it. But I think it's very good, and I love playing with it.
Yeah.
Like Memicles is weird though, because like and this is a totally different conversation. We don't want to delve into too much now, but like Memicles like application has changed a lot. In Ix, it generally is bought just for the extra bump on the spot, but nowadays, like especially in Immortality, there are longer games, much more faction stuff going on. Like it's definitely more conceivable to get that extra victory point. You don't always, but in Rise of Ix, like it's really hard to get all 3 bumps unless you're specifically someone that's good for that. You know, like a Baron or a Tesia, or you've got like shifting of Leto and stuff like that. Other than that, it's really hard to get that. So it's interesting how that application has changed a bit with the new format.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah. All right, Orski, what's your number 4?
Yay.
No, sorry, number 3. Number 3.
Ah, yeah, number 3.
Yeah, we know he's not.
I was like, wait a minute.
Number 3.
It's Dispatch and Envoy. So this is going to be Urgent Mission, kind of still playing into that theme of cards that can create interesting scenarios at the table. Everyone else is taking their turn. Maybe everyone has 2 actions, maybe everyone has 3 actions. And they think, okay, I have to commit exactly 2 more troops to have a guaranteed win in this combat because you don't have any intrigues, blah, blah, blah. And Urgent Mission, being able to recall your agent and send it somewhere else when no one was really expecting you to have that other action, can just create very fun, interesting scenarios at the table. And it's just a very powerful ability as well. People go to the Mentat all the time just for the draw and the quote-unquote extra action, even though you have to commit an action to go there. And Urgent Mission is just that without the cost or anything attached to it. It's a very good intrigue card, and I think it's a very interesting, fun one as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, just for the fact that you can double tap the same location is great. I mean, double research station, just for an example, or
Double Interstellar.
yeah,
Which
double
it typically gets used for, unfortunately, especially in Rise of Ix. That's typically what it gets used for, which is a little bit of a shame. You can do multiple creative stuff, but no, it's there's no doubt it's incredibly powerful, and more agent actions is always good. You know, so yeah, I can't say it's probably not a top 5 card. I didn't put it in my top 5 because it just seemed too easy. But yeah, it's unbelievably powerful in the right hands, and again, just like it lets you, especially if you've got an advantage, it just lets you push that advantage home so heavy. You know, I'm still waiting to see someone Urgent Mission double Highliner. I'm still waiting for that day. I've not seen it yet. It will happen eventually. Maybe with like Guild Accord or something.
I think I've done that actually. I've done that before. It doesn't do that much. I mean, the second one, you just throw like half of them in.
I mean, unless your garrison's completely empty.
Yeah.
I mean, in which case, it's not too bad. But yeah, I know what you mean. But either way, yeah, very, very powerful.
I had a game with Doom of Immortals where he had Kwisatz and he was Hundro and he went to Interstellar and he had the ring and then he had troop transports and then he went again and then he went again and then his Kwisatz went again. And it was just like, oh my god, like how many times is he just gonna keep sending troops in? It was so disgusting.
There's not much you can do. We had it's not too dissimilar to what we have. I mean, obviously, Kwisatz can do the same thing, which is one of his exceptional powers. One of the tourney games with Badger, for example, you know, we're just hitting like interstellar shipping 2-3 times around. It's just like, what do you do? You know, at that point, it's like it's so much compression going on. It's basically almost impossible for anyone to do anything. So it goes to show, like, being able to hit the same spot as well, especially, very, very powerful.
Yep, for sure.
All right, Lannister, what's your number 3?
Number 3, it might surprise some of you a little bit here. I chose Finesse. Finesse, I like to double dip on a lot of things, including the Imperial a bonus. So
I bet you do.
a lot of times, I gotta emphasize this because a lot of people don't like getting that 2 Solari on that spot or Conspire for 4 spice and 5 Solari and 2 troops and an Intrigue. I go there so often for that double dip opportunity. I mean, I think in the first game I played in the tournament, I also got Finesse, and lo and behold, it won me at combat. Got
Yep.
the double dip into it. It also helps you in situations where you've lost an alliance battle with somebody else, and now you get to be Tessia for a moment in time, or even if you don't have that situation, it's still worth 2 swords. Nothing to write home about, but sometimes just enough to beat the person in combat for you. So I like the flexibility of it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's one of the things about like what make Tessia so strong is the fact that you can obviously challenge an alliance, but if you don't get it, you can just send out influence everywhere. And even
Yep.
if you do get it convincingly, you can keep pumping into it and just using your ring to shift everywhere. It's one of the reasons why shifting is so powerful, because you can use shifting allegiances just to charge an alliance, and if you get beat to it, well, so be it. I'll just shift the influence somewhere else. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Um, I'm very glad that this game doesn't, and I hope that it will never change, that there's no way to force people to lose persuasion and influence with actions. I'm very glad that doesn't exist. I think the fact that it's only the person doing it to themselves, I think, is definitely a lot healthier. The amount of times you see people would just like get to an alliance and then someone would just max it out and then make someone lose an influence for whatever reason would be, I think, pretty brutal. So I'm
Yeah.
very glad that's not a thing. So totally different conversation, but it goes to show you the power and the versatility it allows you. You know, if you charge something and then someone like just has like the finds power play, for example, and gets there first. Well, so be it. I can allocate those resources. It's not like spent. It's not like I'm up 5 with the spacing guild and I've got nothing for it because someone else went there first. You can at least still use those resources and allocate them elsewhere, which is super useful.
What's your number 3, BlackShadow?
So, this is going to be fun. So I've actually got a combat card for number 3, and it's actually my highest rated combat card, and I'm going to show everyone listening I'm not trolling you.
Okay. Second wave.
I've got blackmail.
Blackmail. Oh yeah. Okay.
I've got blackmail, and it's funny enough, it goes off very kindly off what we were just talking about. I do a lot of faction hitting. I use faction spaces pretty regularly. It's just how I play the game. I think they're very strong spaces. They're always usually pretty useful at the least, and obviously it's a great way of getting victory points. But again, sometimes you go against someone and they just come out of nowhere and they just usurp you. Blackmail's great. I mean, those resources I put it into these agent spaces, it's not just used up. I can use, deplete from a faction. Like I've got to 3 bumps, for example. Someone pushes in front, I can't really challenge them. Great, I just lose a bump. I don't lose anything for it. 5 swords. Awesome. I do a lot of combat. Now, the question I'm sure is going to be asked by some people is how I not picked Allied Armada, which of course is stronger. And you're right, it does have 2 extra swords for it. But the problem with Allied Armada is it's basically an endgame card. Blackmail doesn't have to be. Blackmail can be used all sorts of times. Blackmail can also be used when you've got an alliance and you're convincing your head to drop below so you can go back up and get the bonus again. Stuff like that, at Bene Gesserit, spacing. I've done that with the Emperor before. Win a combat with Blackmail and then just go back and get my troops again, sort of thing. I think Blackmail's got a lot of versatility in the mid game, and especially it's usually about like rounds 4, 5 sort of thing. You start working out who's really getting what alliances. Blackmail can be a great way to say, all right, it didn't work out, but it's not. Again, it's that effort hasn't gone to waste. I can still use it, and that's 5 swords that no one can really do anything about. And 5 swords is a lot of strength, especially in like rounds 4, 5, when your combat's gonna be like 10 strength, 12 strength, 14 strength. Having a third of that in a card is pretty difficult to play against.
Yeah.
Allied Armada, like an Allied Armada again, yeah, it's 2 spice at the end of the game. You've got a faction line, 7 swords. That's huge. That's a great way to like win in game combats, but Allied Armada doesn't win as many in-game combats as you think, because, alright, you've got 7 swords, but maybe someone else has got blackmail, maybe they've got ambush, they've got, whatever else, vicious talents now with full research, that's 6 swords, that's huge, so Allied Armada I do think has gone down in value a little bit, also that there's also a lot more ways for people to lose their troops in combat when they've clearly lost, like gruesome sacrifice and stuff like that, economics to retreat your troops for Solari, so I think like allied with its massive swords isn't great because you might get like 2 ahead of someone and then they just like torch to their troops. So I think its value is not as quite as good as in the Rise of X. It's better in Rise of X probably than Immortality, where there's a lot more, because troops are now more of a resource as much as just purely for winning combats. They can do other things now. So that's my pump for blackmail. I'm sure by this point all of you think I'm insane and have stopped watching my videos. In which case, I'm sorry.
Oh no, I agree with you. Blackmail is a great card, as you said. It's applicable.
I know you agree. It's them.
It's a great card. Like as you said, like you can utilize it almost any time, and sometimes it's much easier to fulfill those conditions than paying the 2 spice for a private army for a comparative.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'd rather lose that bump than pay that 2 spice.
Yeah, especially if it's like economic supremacy or something like that, and you need that spice. It's happened that, I mean, I've had that happen where you're just like, just 1 spice short of doing both things. And if it was a blackmail, I would have, you get these situations, and blackmail is not free, but free-ish. I'd say it's free-ish, especially in the end of the game.
Blackmail paired with Highliner is brutal.
Yeah.
Because typically, like in the end of the game of Highliner, like the spacing, especially in Immortality now, the spacing guild is locked up. So you're going to Highliner to get a ton of troops, but that influence you're getting, if you've already got 2 influence, is doing absolutely nothing. And by that point, getting the free Solari, it's like, it doesn't really tend to matter very much at all. So being able to have blackmail to use that bump you just got as extra firepower is absolutely savage. It pairs great with Hardy Warriors for a similar reason, but Highliner, it really shines pairing that with blackmail and using that extra bump. Because by that point, you've probably got shipping access. And turning Highliner into 5 troops plus 5 swords, that's really hard to compete with.
Yep. All right, my number 3 is probably going to be surprised about this. It's Machine Culture. Machine Culture is, I think, one of the more versatile and unique cards in the Intrigue deck. It has both an end game, if you have 3 or more tech tiles, it's worth a point, but it also can purchase at plot speed, let's just say, a tech tile. And the reason I think that that's so powerful is it can snipe a tech out from underneath someone else who's been trying to build up, and they're just ahead of you in turn order, or it could let you get like the one that lets you throw a bunch of troops in. Basically, what's that called?
Invasion ships.
Invasion ships. Yeah, that's the big target for Machine Culture's invasion ships. What a blowout that card is. When people don't see that coming, or just like sniping a Holtzman or anything, or a restricted ordnance. Like sometimes it's great to go like high, you got high council, you've got like 1 troop in or something like that, and then end of turn before you reveal, you Machine Culture restricted ordnance for 4 extra daggers. Like that can be the difference between winning a combat and losing a combat. And just for that flexibility of Machine Culture, I think it definitely deserves to be mentioned here. So that's my number 3.
You got to be Rumba Vernius for a turn. Like
you do.
Thought we'd ever say that on a podcast.
Well, his ring is very powerful. I mean, honestly, very powerful ring. Yeah.
People don't realize.
Yeah.
There's a lot of potential. It's about its application. I don't know. I kind of wanted to put Machine Culture on, but I had to look at its end game qualities as well, and getting those free techs is kind of tricky. I see with Culture, if I get it, I'm like, okay, fine, I'll try and pick something up. But I couldn't put it on top 5 for me personally. But I can see why you would probably consider it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean the denial application alone is very noteworthy. Mem quarters or Joe Murky, or as CJ said, the invasion ships, even detonation devices. Like, let's say it's on the row, but people blocked it on the Dreadnought location or tech negotiations. And haha, you can't get it. Well, who's laughing now? Right, so.
Maybe it's more about the fact you're getting the tech, but you're not spending the agent action to have to go there to get it. I guess that's where a lot of the value is as well.
Yeah, well, you can but you can do it. Yeah, you can do it with the with a combat space too, and then that's what's powerful is like you can do all these other things. If you get training drones, just an extra troop, it's not so bad, but getting it early enough and you're getting a lot of value out of it. The surprise factor is pretty nice. It's just a flexible, interesting card that can be used reveal or agent turn. I don't know. I really value those.
Yeah, you can sneak out a little double bump action, steal an alliance if you grab memo quarters and go to a faction spot.
Shell fleet, say similar as well. Yeah, there's a lot of even wind traps, for example, can make a lot of use out of that. Artillery can potentially be brutal if like you've just got a ton of swords. And again, it's 1 spice. Like that's really really good fodder for that. So obviously it's great to be able to reveal and get hold of, say, the point at the end game, but I don't think that's very easy to actually legitimately do unless you find it really early, and the techs tend to be pretty cheap. So, but no, I think yeah, it's probably on me for not putting it in like nearer the top 5, I guess.
No, man, it's your personal list. You can do whatever you want with your personal list.
Yeah, I know. But like, the more I hear, I'm like, yeah, actually, it's not bad.
I think it's just for me personally when that intrigue is used, it's usually to gain a point outright or to deny a point, which
Mhm.
in itself is of value. So, you know, as you guys said, if it's mem quarters or Holtzman engine or artillery, even something like hollow projectors, like comboing off of treachery and in the shadows, stuff like that. Like you're usually when you're using it, you're getting a point somewhere along those lines, or someone's being denied a point. So
Yeah,
to me,
yeah.
that's highly valuable right there.
All right, Orski, what is your number 2?
Yeah, next one's a little bit of an interesting one, but I thought it deserved a spot on the list. Counterattack, the plot/combat card.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I think every time this intrigue card is being played in any kind of useful way, it's a very it can have a very powerful effect. First of all, I already kind of talked about it with double cross, how good it can be to get troops in at the end when no one's really expecting you to, and being able to throw in 2 from your garrison to the conflict. It can catch people off guard a lot of the time. It can be the swing you need, and it's a four sword swing a lot of the time. And if you don't have time to make it to the combat space, being able to get those in with while also going to more valuable spaces is really nice. And then the bottom part, if an opponent plays a combat intrigue card, you get 4 daggers. I love that design. It's so funny. It's a very punishing card for, let's say someone's like dominating in the combat and they're like, you know what? I'm gonna sacrifice 3 of my troops, get the victory point, and I should still be
Yeah.
good enough to win. Nope, you just enabled counterattack, or maybe someone goes for it's like very close. Maybe they're 1 ahead and they play like strategic push or something to get some Solari out of it. Boom,
I've seen.
counterattack. It's
I've
just
had that.
another like thing people have to account for in the game, and I like that a lot.
It's wonderful design. I don't. I think they absolutely nailed it. It's a very underrated card as well. Like people just see it for 4 swords, but there was a lot more going on to it than that. You need sometimes a bit of luck, I think, to kind of get a lot of use out of it. But it's very fun when you do get it and you do pinch combat out of nowhere with a card that you're like, oh, and if you hadn't have played, like finesse or push especially. I've had that before where someone's strategic pushed with a sword ahead of me to get the Solarian. Like, well, I'll just be taking this combat now, thank you. And it's like you feel kind of bad, but it's like it's good card design. I can't fault the design of it at all. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is one of those cards that also combos with Desert Ambush really well, so you can get that deploy and push 2 more troops out, which is pretty fun, or two more troops or dreadnoughts out. This card is super funny because I played a game recently where someone was in second place and had this card in hand, and they were like the opponent was 1 point ahead, and they were hoping they're gonna play like a master tactician, and then they could tie them in combat. But what ended up being is no one played any combat intrigue cards, and they just got second place. It was like, oh my god, it was really funny.
That is the one bad time when you've got counterattack ready to win, and then no one plays anything. You're like, oh gosh,
Yeah.
that does feel pretty bad. But it's the way it goes. But it's a fun card. I think that's the thing. Like no one looks at say like counterattack and like looks at it badly, and he's sort of like, oh, of course you had that. Like it's always viewed pretty well. So I can't fault Paul for the designing for that. I think it's really awesome.
I agree with you, Orski. I think this is a well designed card. It has interesting conditions, and it feels more like it feels like what it says it is. It feels like a counterattack. Like some of the cards sometimes don't feel like what they are. Like I don't know. I'm trying to think of another one.
I was about to say
strategic push. What is strategic push supposed to mean? It's like you just get 2 daggers, and then if you win a combat, you get two Solari. I'm not exactly sure how that's.
Yep.
I don't know. That doesn't feel like anything, but this one feels like rewarding, and it's thematically appropriate. So I really like that one. Yeah. So, all right, Lannister, what's your number 2?
Number 2 is gonna surprise you. It's not a combat card.
That is surprising.
Ixian
Diversion.
Probe.
Ixian Probe.
Ixian Probe. So you discard 2 cards from your hand to draw 2 new cards. I love the flexibility of it. Anytime I get this card, Intrigue, I'm happy because it helps me filter through, helps me cycle, helps me to get the offload effects. Basically, you can use it to reorganize your deck, or you can use it to cycle through um, treachery or anything of that nature, just to combo off some more. It's a great card overall. Like, you can use it for buy power when you need it, or daggers when you need it. It's just highly flexible, and it has so many applications in Ix and Immortality, and it's one of my favorite intrigues.
Yeah, I can't not agree really. I think it's pretty. It goes to show as well, especially when Rise of X came, like the power of being able to like have these intrigues, and obviously the text as well. Like Holo Projects, for example. To cycle through your deck is obviously incredibly strong. In case you have a biggish deck and you haven't been able to trash anything, eventually you're going to get a real still hand. So it's kind of a get out of jail card. But obviously, combining that with unloading effects is absolutely brutal. I mean, just a deck, for example, that has say like In the Shadows and a Freighter Fleet. Like having Ix Engineer just adds so much value to that, especially early game as well, when you can like get those action drivers going a bit more. There's no question there's a ton of value onto that. So it's a good way of getting out of a bit of a tricky spot. Obviously, you take a bit of a gamble. You don't know what you're going to draw unless you're playing as Paul, which obviously I do a lot. So, but yeah, no, very, very strong card.
Yeah, agreed. And there's that double-edged sword kind of thing to it too, where it is very good if you have the right hand for it, but if you draw a very powerful hand, then this card obviously becomes a lot worse because you don't want to be discarding your good cards to draw your bad cards. But I like this card a lot. I think it's really good, and just having on-demand access to your unload abilities when you need them, being able to trigger that freighter fleet right when you're at the top when you go to a combat space, so you can get the troops directly into the combat. Just very fun and interesting combinations you can get from Extreme Probe, and I agree.
BlackShadow.
Most interesting of picks this, but it is ruthlessly effective, and that is Stage Incident. Straightforward. Get free troops in the combat, sacrifice them, get a victory point. Easy as you like. Has anyone really ever drawn this halfway through a game and not been unhappy to see this?
It's just a point.
It's typically a point. It's obviously it's more than just a point. Like it can be. Obviously, it can give you a reason. Like if you're in a bit of a bad spot, like in the later rounds, you're like, I just need to find an extra point to get over the line. Stagings can be that, but obviously, its extra impact is that it's and this has been something that's happening a lot more with Rise of X, especially. Because gruesome sacrifice now in Immortality, because gruesome sacrifice now exists, is the ability to force people to overcommit troops and then taking away your own troops for your own benefit, and then kind of making them waste actions and resources and time ultimately spent on trying to protect a victory that you're not actually legitimately going for. It's kind of that bluffing sort of idea. It's gruesome sacrifice. I almost put on like if I was doing like top 10, I probably would put gruesome sacrifice on because it's so easy to 2 troops. But 3 points for a conflict is huge. And the amount of times where say like, you'll go in fairly heavy for like a tier 3 combat, for example, you're scared that someone's got like some powerful say combat cards to catch up and surpass you. If you got staged, it doesn't matter. You're still getting a point out of it. So it's not a complete loss of time and situation, and you're still probably getting hold of 2nd or 3rd place rewards on top of that as well, which isn't bad by any stretch of imagination. So very powerful, pretty hard to do a lot about, even if you're just like in the end of the game, just throwing 3 troops, you got nothing else to do, just to stage them out. It's a point, and how can you argue with that? Very, very strong, hard to do a lot about. I mean, you typically, unless it's like the absolute end of the game, you're never upset to see this at all.
Also feels nice to make people overcommit.
Yeah, that's the big thing. That's the application of it. It's not just to say, just getting the free troops in. It's making people have to respond to what you're doing, knowing that you're basically bluffing and that you're not actually intending to win the combat at all. And it's time that's spent that's on them. So, if it never feels good to kind of go like Allied Armada, say for example, to win a combat and then they stage. It feels horrendous. And you're like, oh, Christ's sakes. But it's part of the game.
Yeah, and on the other end as well, if you see someone racing ahead and they keep putting in troops, even though like no one's really competing or getting close to them, you can kind of read what they have sometimes, and maybe that encourages you to balance the game a bit, put a couple of your troops in there. I think it can create some interesting situations as well.
Yeah, it falls into a similar situation we've talked about in like the card rankings, for example, with negotiating withdrawal and obviously retreating the free troops for the faction bump. If you think they've got it, you need to try and find that spot where they're kind of like indifferent as to whether they actually want to do it or not. So, example, instead of like, if you think they got stage instant, for example, don't try and actually beat them in the combat. Sometimes you might be better off like trying to make sure you're like 3 or 4 strength behind them, so that if they stage, they're going to give you the victory rather than
Right,
you
right.
actually having to go for it. Now, that's hard to do, and it's pretty ballsy to even try this. But I've had like a game before against someone like who had negotiated withdrawal, and twice like they wanted them to withdraw because they wanted to obviously get faction bumps, but they're giving me victory points in conflict because I'm like keeping track on their deck, I'm watching their moves, I'm like I'm sure they've got it. It just seems too weird. And both times it puts them in hard spots because it's like you don't want to be retreating troops for bumps and you're giving up people victory points. It feels hideous. So then it's like they're losing part on a huge part of that card's value. So stage is a lot more difficult because you don't know if anyone's ever got it. Whereas obviously you can see if someone buys negotiated. But if you do think something's going on, it can be something you can try and capitalize on. And there will be times that they're still going to stage and give you first place. So don't be afraid to try it. But it's pretty ballsy. I won't lie.
Nice. That's a good choice. It's a very, very powerful card. My number 2, it was mentioned earlier, so I'm not going to say that much about it. It's Finesse is my number 2. It's one of my favorite cards in the entire game. I love it. Every time I draw it, I feel so tricky. I feel like I can do all sorts of wacky things, either, again, doubling up on a faction bonus or stealing alliance or getting rid of that extra point of influence I didn't need and putting it somewhere else. And I mean, the fact that it is even a combat card is kind of just like icing on the cake. It's just crazy. But that, yeah, Finesse is my number 2. All right.
How much value? I was going to put it. How much value do people actually put on the combat side of Finesse? Obviously, the faction shifting is pretty useful. But what about the actual combat side? Like, I'm curious.
I don't use it that much. I don't. Maybe I've used it once as a combat card.
Yeah,
Rarely.
I really use it for the combat card application. Normally, I would use it for the bonuses, or if it's a Hail Mary, then I'll use the two daggers. But generally, I'll try and save it up for that moment to be dirty to another player. Yeah,
Yeah.
when you do it.
All right, number 1, Orski.
Okay, for number 1, and I've now realized that a lot of my cards have fallen into a similar vein. In
Putting
and
troops in the combat.
you might be able to guess.
Let me guess.
And yeah,
Yeah.
now I'm embarrassed, but Rapid Mobilization was my my number 1 card, and this one I really like just because it can be very telegraphed if you're going for Rapid Mobilization play. You're just not putting in anything. You have like a million troops in your garrison. And you can almost bluff that you have Rapid Mobilization sometimes, especially at the end of the game. Some of these 2 victory point combats, it can really threaten people into putting in way more. Like, they're by themselves and they're still throwing in troops because if you have Rapid Mobilization, it can basically ruin their game.
Yeah.
So I think just the presence of this card in the game in and of itself can create funny situations. And then, obviously, it's just really good value. If you have a huge garrison and you can't necessarily hit enough combat spaces to get all of them in, it becomes very good. And yeah, but I just like the design. I like how it's I like what it does.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think it's the trick is like not telegraphing it. That's the tough part of rapid mobilization. Obviously, if someone starts like suspiciously building like 6 troops, 8 troops, 10 troops in the garrison, then you can start feeling it's about kind of the subtlety of trying to not make it obvious. Maybe instead of going, like loads of, maybe like going to conspire, for example, picking up a couple of troops, just going shipping, pick up those troops, kind of doing it quietly, not too suspiciously, and then you throw them in.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, as a bit of a sidebar here, I do admittedly have extra value and like this for rapid mobilization in epic mode. Because you can get rapid mobilization at the very start of the game, and I will cite the game that we did on the stream, where I got rapid mobilization straight away, and it meant I could just set myself up in this first round, do bits and pieces, and then take the conflict. Because like, how can you plan for someone having rapid straight at the early part of the game? You basically can't. So I think it can be a lot of fun. You've got to be a little careful though sometimes. Try not to make it too obvious you've got it, but sometimes even then, if people know you've got it, they can't do a whole lot about it. Because if you've got like 10, 11, 12 troops in that garrison, like that's just so much firepower. It's like it's kind of hard to do a lot about. So, and at the very least, it frees you up to do other bits and pieces anyway. So it's pretty strong.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, for me, the greater part of the application is as a combat based specialist. It's hard to dump in troops while hitting the access zones, such as bold space or wealth, or any number of those things. This allows you to go to those areas and not really have to commit to the troops. I think in the second game with Orski during the tournament, he was commentating. He's like, well, what's Lannister doing? He's not even entering in combat. He's just like jumping around the axis. Lo and behold, there was that rapid mobilization.
Yep.
That's a pretty sneaky card. Yeah, it can catch you off guard. It's easy to forget it too, I think, with some of the techs. Like when you use like invasion ships or something, like generally just pick up invasion ships and you're like, oh, they're setting up for the next round, and like, oh no, they're going in. It's all over. Like that kind of thing can really catch you off guard. Lannister, how about you? Number one.
I was a little bit stuck on one of the two. As CJ called it out, I had advanced weaponry. The second one I had was cannon turrets.
Oh.
Just because the meta has changed that dreadnoughts are very much applicable, and it's pretty much good for 5 swords, in my opinion, for cannon turrets. And advanced weaponry is also very good for the beginning, even in the end. Like having an extra 3 or 4 strength, depending if you're Romber, in a persistent situation is just really awesome, and you don't have to spend that extra action to do it. You just have to have the Solari ahead of time, and you can pour on the damage. So I'm gonna have to go with cannon turrets,
Okay.
just because it is so detrimental to a lot of people's win condition, to win the combat itself, or to detonate your device.
It's the detonation denial. That's the
Yeah,
huge thing,
yeah.
isn't it? It can be really brutal. It can also double as well as like a combat variant of double cross as well. You do see sometimes people will just like throw in a dreadnought, just trying to pick up like some cheap resources on for free basically, and that can be a way to kick them out and completely deny them any access to anything. So, but yeah, it's like detonation denial, especially that can be really brutal. To get to put the time, the spice and detonation devices go to win the combat. Someone just puts in like one troop at the end and just chucks your dreadnought out.
Yep.
Feels hideous.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember in the beginning, preliminary, people didn't use dreadnoughts at all, and people are complaining. It's like, oh, cannon turrets is just equal to 2 swords. No, no, no. A lot of times it's worth 5 swords at this point. So yeah.
It is fascinating. It's something we need to do a bigger dive on at some point, like how dreadnoughts have like come more into it. Immortality has helped for that. I think there's no question. I think just people are more comfortable with Ix now. It's similar to like what happened with Tesia. If you think back to the Imperium Cup, for example, almost no one played Tesia in the first round, for example, and now like she's pretty common because people are used to the game. They've tried her out and realized she's pretty good.
Yeah.
But in the Imperium Cup, though, I think it was only 2 or 3 people that dared use Tesia because like if you went with her and it didn't work out, you felt kind of silly. But that's how things have changed over the course of time.
Yeah, for sure.
BlackShadow, what are your number one?
I wanted to be more clever and more fancy, but it has to be. To me, this is the most powerful card in the game, probably, and that's Plans Within Plans, especially when you consider Immortality now and how games are longer and there's much more faction access. Plans Within Plans is just like it's such a brutal card. It's so hard to do a lot about, especially in Immortality. Getting free influence of various factions is not as difficult as it used to be. Rides of Ix, it can go a little bit, but like anytime anyone gets Plans in Plans, like you're feeling pretty good about your game. You'd expect to get at least 1 point out of this, maybe even 2. And Immortality, like it's not even difficult to get 2 in-game points out of this. Highly destructive, difficult to do a lot about. Even if you think someone's got it, like how do you stop them getting those points? There's not a lot you can really do. It was tempting. It was interesting comparing this to say like Call the Market, which of course is also incredibly powerful. But I don't think quite has as much consistent bite. And then obviously say Grand Conspiracy, which I think is probably a slightly fairer design. It's not as easy to achieve those points, but then maybe that's for the best. But especially for me, again, I do a lot of faction hitting. I do a lot of faction racing. Like if any time I get Plans in Plans, I feel pretty good about my game. So for me, it's got to be that. And I spent a lot of time thinking if there's any single more powerful card in the Intrigue deck in the game, and I think over a consistent basis, I couldn't think of one.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, especially for Immortality, as you said, it's like 1 point is almost guaranteed, and 2 is for certain leaders completely 100% guaranteed. it. I didn't mention it just because I didn't want to feel dirty about it. So yeah.
Yeah, and this is the thing. I,
Feel
I,
bad.
I had a feeling that was going to be the case, but I think if we went through this and no one said like plans within plans, like I think we wouldn't be able to, be reputable enough to continue this anymore. So I figured for our own sakes,
Sure.
You
I
took one
had
yeah.
for the team. Took one for the team.
yeah, you're welcome, everyone. But if you guys can think of a card that is just more brutally powerful than this,
Yeah, it's that and Court of the Market. It just really it depends on like what your game state is. If you're going Spice Must Flow, then Court of the Market's gonna be better. If you're going Plans Within Plans, I do find Court of the Market usually is a better like Hail Mary, like, oh, I just drew this at the end of the game and now I have 2 victory points out of nowhere. But I guess Plans Within Plans doesn't require competition with others, which makes it very good as well. I'd say they're both very high tier, and Plans Within Plans snakes it out by a little bit.
Yeah, I have no disagreement about it's probably the best of the end games. My number one, I think, is actually better though.
Ooh,
is this
And
really divergent?
fighting words.
It's Diversion. No, I'm just kidding. It's not Diversion. It's Demand Respect. I think Demand
Oh.
Respect is the best combat card, the best intrigue card in the game. If you manage to get this round one, and you win a combat, you are probably so far ahead that it's hard for anyone to catch you. It's also a little bit busted if you can win it on the double bump intrigue or the double bump combat, so you can go up 4 spaces. Or that one works too. Machinations or the level 3. I was thinking of
You're thinking of
whatever the Vision one is. Yeah, the one everyone hates. But like the fact that it's just you can pay 2 spice to go up to with a single faction, or you can just go up 1 by winning the combat. That's totally fine, and it catches people off guard a lot of the time. When I see this played, it's usually against me. I rarely get it. It is so infuriating when someone like gets it and then like wins the first combat, goes up 2 with the Spacing Guild, and suddenly they have like shipping forever, and you're like, oh my god, what is happening? But besides that, it's just a great way to snake an alliance away from people. It's a big threat at the end of the game. If you have it at the end of the game and you're winning a combat, you can just threaten to take over 2 to 3 points, maybe more. 3 or 4 points if you're loaded on Spice and Solari, and it's an economic supremacy. There's so many things that can happen with this. So the only thing I'd say about it is I think it's a fair card, even though it is very powerful, that it is sometimes very difficult to win a conflict. You might get this and you're like, your plan was, well, I threw all my combat troops in round 4 and now I'm basically Spice Must flowing for the rest of the game. And you draw Demand Respect, you're like, can I make this work?
Yeah, timing I think is a bit of an issue here. I think one thing that's fascinating as well is obviously how Immortality has changed how we view alliances and how much we should commit to them and how much we need to defend them. Especially compared to Rise of X, where like beforehand with Rise of X, you think that it was very common for someone to say go to like Emperor, for example, or Bene Gesserit, or even Spacing, go 4 bumps and just assume they're good for the game.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously how Immortality is completely turned that on its head. Demand Respect obviously I think does feed into that. I think what Demand Respect's kind of its power is the fact that you have no idea if someone's got it, and it's almost impossible to predict someone's got it. It's a hell of a stealer. For whatever reason. That's what its power. The fact it just steals alliances out of nowhere. And sometimes it's in a position where they then have another action. They can go to that faction and just completely seal up an alliance, and it feels brutal.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely feeds into that. But yeah, timing is its issue. Like if you can get this in, like say round 1, round 2, for example, in a game, that's enormous. Towards the end of the game, obviously it's a little bit more. Depends on game state, I guess. But there's no question that the ability to allow you to snowball early is something that should not be underestimated. In my respect.
Yeah. Anyone else want to touch on Demand Respect? Are we all good?
What else can I say? I mean, it cheats out 4 bumps. I mean, I still have nightmares in that one particular match where it was for 2 shipping reward, and Shuttle Fleet was up there, so continued it.
Oh,
Oh my god.
Yeah, that was one
oh,
bump for completing shipping, 2 bumps for Shuttle Fleet, 2 more from Demand Respect. Oh
yeah.
god, yeah,
That's pretty hideous. Yeah, just and of course just get the spice as well on top of it to pay
Yep.
for it as well. So it's on the house. Yeah, that's pretty savage.
yeah, 4 bumps right there. I was like, god damn.
Not a lot you can really do. I mean, I've said it before, and I always say it like if it's ever like a triple bump or more, just you basically can't really defend against it. If they've
Yep.
got it, they've got it. You do see a lot more now of Immortality. There's a lot more ways to do it, but even so, like it's very hard to defend against triple bumps unless you're just going to max out alliance super early, which sometimes doesn't even feel that bad nowadays. Like I do that. I do that sometimes. I'll just if I can go spacing, I will just max spacing immediately before I do anything else. Because then by that point you can kind of see how the ground lies. You know, you can always like maybe sit on 5 persuasion, 5 out of 6, and kind of see how it goes. But you're always running that risk of someone being able to do something that you weren't preparing for, taking that alliance, and then you're going to feel like a complete dolt. So don't do what I've done sometimes. Just max out that alliance. It's not a problem anymore. You can sleep easy. Otherwise, Demand Respect will kick your ass.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to Orski, to BlackShadow, and Lannister for being here. I am CJ, and we will see you soon. Now you can do your thing.
Oh, I don't know what I said now. No. Yeah, and please do throw tons of comments at us as well in the section here. It's really appreciated. We had loads of conversation came out the last podcast. There was a lot of ground we covered. Obviously, Immortality and all its new stuff. There's not even to get into the Talaxu Master stuff, which then spawned its own thread on the TTS Club Discord with its poll, which had about 1,000 messages in 3 days. I stopped coming through that at about 250. I was like, I'm just gonna let them crack on with it, and if they need my help, they can ping me, because I think I literally went and I did a stream actually on the channel, and in the space of a 4-hour stream, there was about 450 messages. I was like, I'm not reading this. Nope.
Yeah.
No dice. So please throw it in. We enjoy it.
Everyone's very passionate about the Tlilaxu Master goal change proposals.
Oh boy, are they just.
All right, everybody. Thank you all. We'll see you next time. Take care.